Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, and it is July. So a lot of things are happening this month, but really, Penn State football is back by the end of the month. So this today is kicking off our season preview month. All month long, we're going to be previewing different aspects of 2025, leading into training camp, which starts at the end of this month. And to help me do that and to set all that up today is Nate Bauer, esteemed reporter at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Let me be the first to say to you this week, because this is the last you're not going to be here for the rest of the week. Happy 4th of July. Happy 4th of July week, Nate. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. That's a great way to kick off the week with some American spirit and pride. I love it.
Go.
There's a parade in State College on July 4th. It's like and you know, is that arguably the best fireworks anywhere, which was a thing that I used to be into, and now that I have two kids is not as much of a thing that I'm into because
you're not paying to get all the way up close to Fourth Fest. You're not trying to get all the way down there and be right in the thick of it.
I mean, I think my children would be terrified, and you know, they might have aged out of being well, it's pretty loud.
Yeah.
You know, so we'll see. It's a possibility that we do something, but to be honest with you, we live close enough that
you can. That's what I was thinking. Like, you can just get to a high vantage point and then watch them from somewhere, you know, in town.
No, yeah. I mean, I don't want to.
I'm not condoning people like they spend a lot of time and effort to put together Fourth Fest. If you've never been, like, genuinely, it is a unique thing about State College and something you should consider coming to see because, as Nate's talking about, the production value rivals Disney, and they invest in the infrastructure and the timing to music and all those things that is world class. Like, people have come to study Fourth Fest. So I'm not endorsing people stealing that by just looking at it from afar, but fireworks are in the sky. Like, at a certain point, it is the sky is not private property. Like, you can see things in the distance.
If you live in State College, you've got a view of those fireworks. So.
Yeah, but are you? I know we're talking a lot about 4th of July right now, which is exactly what people showed up for, but it's July 1st. Give me a break. Are you a big parade guy? Like, I know you have kids.
No.
Okay, good. Me either. Yeah, I'm not a parade guy.
No, it's terrible. But, you know, it's okay. It's fine.
It's a thing to do.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, it's, listen, I'm on the record. I'll continue to be on the record. The time from Friday afternoon, right, when kids are out of daycare / school until Monday morning when they go back is the most difficult time in my life. It's the most challenging circumstances that I face. And how do you fill those hours? Like, because you have to be productive. But then the kids are drained, and then they're crazy because they're drained. It's a real tightrope in the summer, especially to keep them occupied and entertained and not staring at a screen.
Yeah, and not burn out.
Also to not burn out. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my TED Talk.
Well, here's the thing: is you're gonna have to keep with a different TED Talk, which you're the perfect first person for this. Part of this whole July preview and the shift in the calendar is also that we are officially in the revenue sharing generation of college football. July 1 has been this very important date on the calendar as we transition into players being paid by the schools directly. So big picture, what does today mean for Penn State and for college football that, you know, that you find meaningful?
Now, see, the first part of the question I can answer. The second part of the question about what's meaningful is nothing. There's nothing meaningful about it.
That's where this conversation was going. That was the problem. Was I was trying to set it up, but really we're going with, like, has anything changed? Like, did anything change today?
What changes is on the bank statement on right. So when the wire comes through, we get a direct deposit from On3 LLC, right? Whatever it is, that's what it says on our bank statement. Instead of Happy Valley United, it will now say Penn State University on Penn State's players' bank statements. But that was going to happen anyway, and that was happening anyway, right? Like, all of this has been sort of a foregone conclusion whether or not the House settlement came through or not. So the fact that it did is it's here. I don't know what the longevity of it is going to be, right? How long-standing will this set of parameters be? But yeah, it's a step towards formalizing something approaching structure, right, in the sport. It's just that there's just a lot of stuff that still needs to be sorted out before this feels in any way like a permanent solution, because it's not.
Yeah. So part of what I think specifically over the last month, we're not going to be talking about recruiting specific things here, but NIL and recruiting has handed Penn State a bit of a beating over the last couple of weeks. And I think what Penn State fans were hopeful for is that this clearinghouse and these rules of everything having to be declared starting on July 1 would, I don't want to say level the playing field, but make things a little bit easier for Penn State where they can get into the game. Is that in any way something that you see as far as the clearinghouse specifically of having all of these deals be reported and then having some sort of adjudication on fairness, which I guess, how do you see that? Is that something that will help Penn State, do you think, now, if it's established now?
Will it help Penn State? I mean, maybe, but I don't think. Here's the problem, as I see it for Penn State, and really in Penn State fans, I think, grasp of this is there is this acknowledgement and pearl clutching, rightfully so, in terms of the competitive future for the program of these other programs, right? Oregon, Southern Cal, Texas are bankrolled by donors beyond their cap, right? Rev share investment, right? And so they have these other mechanisms already in place that dwarf Penn State and give Penn State a hard time keeping up in that capacity, because there really has not been a solution presented, as far as I could tell, of stopping these outside deals, right? So that's not happening, and Penn State doesn't want that to happen, because here's this secondary piece of this that is not acknowledged, which is Penn State has, comparatively speaking, decent NIL from fans, right? Is it to the level of some of those titans? No, it's not. But if you're looking at the broader landscape of college football, Penn State's in great shape, right? Penn State's better off than tons of other schools. It's just the issue is, like in the microest of micro senses, that Penn State wants these elite recruits, like the height of the height, and it wants the elite of the elite transfer portal, and it wants to retain all of its best players. All of that is fine, but you're competing against, like, the direct competition just so happens to be better suited for many of those things, right? And so Penn State should feel good about where it stands in this department against Iowa, Washington, right?
Right. But so, Nate, here's the thing, and I think you're right. Like, so a lot of times I'm just playing devil's advocate here for the conversation. The problem is it's the Ricky Bobby effect of sports. If you ain't first, you're last. So if you're not in the driver's seat of NIL and national championship aspirations, then some people view you as, well, what's the difference? You're the same as Iowa at that point. Like, it's expected you beat Iowa. It's expected that you beat Illinois in these conversations. Penn State's comparing themselves to those four schools. And I guess, like, that's the thing that I've noticed the most frustration from Penn State fans is they don't care that they're on the nicest street in the house that maybe isn't the nicest. They want to be in the nicest house on the nicest street.
First of all, that's an excellent way to put it, right? To frame it. And I understand that. And look, James Franklin wants the same thing, right? James Franklin wants it to be great. The program wants it to be great. The athletic department wants it to be great and to compete in all those areas. And they're trying, they're doing what they can, but there are certain built-in advantages based on the wealth of donors that are giving to those other programs that are creating some issues for Penn State. And I think the thing that I come back to repeatedly is it would be different. I would be able to frame this a little bit differently if it was comparatively close, right? If it was Oregon coming in with $28 million a year and Penn State had a roster 24, right? Or 23, then that would, okay, you can start to compare apples to apples, but based on what's out there. And again, I am not the expert on what other programs, beyond Penn State actually have. I just know what's been reported. Right. And when you see the numbers of 35, 40, 45, 50 million dollars that are thrown out there for singular season budgets.
This is crazy. Like, that number is crazy. Just as a reference point, Nate's just saying 40 or 50 million dollars. I think the last year we had the conversation, it was 20. So it more than doubled in a year.
That was a lie, though. Like, that's the issue. And I feel like I addressed that. And like, Ohio State's roster last year cost more than $20 million. And depending on who you listen to, and again, this is us just talking, but like, it was double that, maybe more. So, the idea of this cap, you have to divide $20.5 million and it's going to go incrementally by 3% every year and blah, 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 blah to satisfy the entire athletic department. You got to split it up. Like, okay, that's fine in concept if it wasn't for the piece of outside donations still bankrolling your programs. Again, which is the thing that Penn State is largely a beneficiary of. Like, Penn State benefits from that system because there's other programs that don't have nearly what Penn State has from a fan and outside donor, giving support level. It's just that it's not there with some of the best of what college football has to offer.
I've had this rant before, so I'm not going to go into the full thing, but this would be so much more fun if the numbers were transparent and there was a salary cap, because you could have these conversations about the structure and the decisions and the tactics of building a team with constraints. But if you have no constraints, why is this fun for everybody that isn't Oregon or Ohio State? Like, how is this fun? How is this model enhancing college football if it feels like disparity is being baked in even more than it was previously? That feels like this is not good for college football in the long run. Or maybe I'm wrong, and everyone just loves to see the same two logos in the championship game every other year.
I agree with that sentiment, but I mean, there's multiple ways to go off of that. I agree with that sentiment, but the 12-team playoff changes that. Just getting into the playoff, you got to see, right? The expansion of the playoff changes that. The thing, though, that you said that I think has to be addressed is it isn't the totality of college football about conspiracy and like the shadowy things happening behind, right? Like, my formative experience of following Penn State football, I was 10 years old when 1994 happened, was this great conspiracy against Penn State, right? This juggernaut Penn State team that was, of course, a shoo-in to winning a national championship. Like, just on its face, just on the merits between Nebraska and Penn State, didn't have an opportunity to play Nebraska, but also that, you know what, the reason that votes went to Nebraska were because Tom Osborne didn't have one, right? Didn't have a national championship, right? Like, and there's no way to prove it.
Sure.
Right? Like, that's the whole, that is the essence of what college football has always been, has been this dramatic, there is no way to prove it. I do think that the sport is taking massive strides forward with the playoff, with some of the other things that are happening to finally at least prove something. It's just, a little bit in the vein of Major League Baseball, where you have small market teams and not, right?
Yeah.
Without
Yeah.
a salary cap,
Yeah.
which they will not have until student athletes are paid as
unionized
employees.
and seen as employees. Yeah. So yeah, I'm allergic to conspiracy theories, but I think you're right in terms of like where we were to where we are now, how we got here. Like, yes, the road is, we are on the road to progress, but the lack of a level playing field in college sports is just, it gets
not college sports, college football, basketball has a tournament. All the other sports have tournaments, right? All the other sports are, but there's always been, I will never forget this. And I'm probably repeating myself. I took a like sports information type course at Penn State. And like, this is the lone fact that stands out, is that the NCAA put in place a rule in the early 2000s, dictating how you could print as an athletic department, how you could print your media guides, that only the front and back cover, inside and out, could be color pages. And then the inside had to be all black and white, and you could stack it as much as you want. And so if you went to Big Ten Media Days, segue, if you went to Big Ten Media Days, you would see at that time, these massive just Bibles of books that some programs had, and then you look at some others, Northwestern, that didn't, right? That had these small pamphlets. That was the size of their media guides. It's always been about who has and who doesn't, and this is just a different form of that until everyone gets together, says kumbaya, and decides that for the future of the sport, it has to be a hard cap that makes sense and that can be enforced.
And when that moment comes, I believe they will be drinking anti-fragile beer, because you are building a resilient organization that can withstand challenges and is in itself anti-fragile. That would be the goal for the future of college football and college sports. But let's just talk about the beer, because that's here right now. There's nothing to speculate about anti-fragile, Nate.
So good. It's so good. And I'm saying that as a person that went on Friday afternoon, spent multiple hours there, and did not have a beer. My guy Todd was on the bar. Awesome as always. He's the friendliest face and the best conversation you will experience in State College. It was great. They actually had quite a bit of.
So is this just now your new daycare? You're going Friday, and your kids are playing in the upper section while you sit there?
No. They weren't invited. Stop it.
Okay.
No, all right. Yeah. No, they don't get to go. But it's before they get out of daycare and school, and so that's a great opportunity to go there. John's. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the cheesesteak stand out front. Has the best cheesesteaks in State College, the best beer in State College, an ever rotating menu, but a lot of old favorites that pop back in and out. So they got a lot of stuff that is already fantastic, that is only going to get better with some of the announcements that they've made about expanding to a second location and expanding their brewing and canning operation. So all good things from Anti-Fragile. It was great to get back there. We haven't been in a little bit. Fitz and I went on Friday afternoon. That's the best. It's great. When it legitimately, like, choosing where to get that window of time or where to spend that window of time, it's a no-brainer for us. We want to go to Anti-Fragile, and we're glad every time that we do.
Appreciate Anti-Fragile being a sponsor here on the BWI Live Show. Of course, this is a great break to remind you to subscribe here to the YouTube channel, like the video, share with your friends, and get ready for Penn State football. I know, like, it feels like it's forever away. 60 days, I think, is what the number is. That's not that long, because this is 4th of July week. You're probably going to go on vacation, and then, like, the week after that is when things start. So, bam. Training camp is the start of the season, and that is so close. So now's a good time to subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Speaking of Fitz, by the way, not here this week. He'll be back next week. So just obvious, that was an obvious thing. He's not here. I got right into the conversation. I forgot to mention that. I think it's obvious if you haven't heard his voice on the podcast or if you haven't seen him here on the YouTube show. He'll be back next week. So Big Ten Media Days. Speaking of things that happen in July, they're going to make it feel like camp is right here. That's coming up later this month. We found out who the representatives are going to be. Nick Dawkins is in his 4th time going, I think, as a super senior, as a 6-year player. Who are the other guys going with Nick Dawkins?
Drew Allar, first time, only time, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting and big. James Franklin likes to choose guys who are exhausting their eligibility, right? Like it's pretty. You've had the rare instance of guys who came back for an extra year, but in this case, that these 3 guys will not be back: Drew Allar, Nick Dawkins, and Zach Wheatley. So, three of the better talkers, conversationalists, representatives, that Penn State has to offer should be good to see them out in Las Vegas.
Are you going? I know Greg always goes to these things, and he's our representative on the ground. Yeah. I've never been.
Yeah, I have for many years, and I don't need to do that. That's it's part of the move to On 3 and sort of the expansion of our staff at Blue White Illustrated. One of the benefits is having a guy in Greg who, let's be honest, he can write 30 stories before I finish 3.
Yeah.
And so that event in particular is like just right up Greg's alley, because that is what Big Ten Media Day is. It is 30 sound bites and 30 opportunities to spin very quickly a story, that people can consume and take in that news as quickly as possible. So it's always great. And look, I'll be there in spirit. I will listen to the audio that he sent back. It's crazy. Like, yeah. For people that are listening, I don't know. This is a little inside baseball, but the transcription services that we all use and stick together on, you can live, not only like broadcast, can you hear the broadcast of what's being recorded, but it's transcribing it for you in real time. You can, right? So
for the most part, yeah.
For the most part,
yeah.
But the process is very, very incredible. Given that I was raised or came into this profession as a person who had this like mini digital recorder that you just put in front of people's faces, and then you took it back to your laptop, you plugged it into the USB, you downloaded the file, and then you listen to it and transcribe, stop, transcribe, stop, transcribe, stop. This is a much more efficient process.
Yeah, and if you have undiagnosed ADHD like me, that process takes forever. I'm happy we've moved on to a new generation of covering, which again, that's how you want to know how AI impacts your enjoyment of football. Little inside baseball there. Now, we've done this here on the show a couple times. And I just wanted to formalize this. These guys do amazing work over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Great time to remind you to sign up right now for $1, because we're going to get into some premium content. Just the highlights of Nate Bauer getting exclusive interviews with some of the top people on the Penn State payroll, I think I can say now, including Andy Kotelnicki, Jim Knowles, and Drew Allar. So he had a conversation.
And now Franklin.
And James Franklin. But I was putting that one aside for today. But I wanted to have a conversation about you having a conversation.
The conversation. About the conversation.
I mean, it's very Inside Actors studio with Nate Bauer. This is going to be high level. I'm going to get the lighting right now. We're going to get into some dramatic lighting, and we're going to talk about the conversations that Nate Bauer had earlier this month. I will be conversing with Nate about his conversations. Nate,
did you change your studio lighting? Is that?
Yeah, I turned off one of my lights to give more of that dramatic effect. The shadows on one side of the face. I wanted to two concepts that I heard I read over in your articles from Andy Kotelnicki and from Drew Allar. So Andy Kotelnicki, from what I could understand in terms of 2025, what do you have to do coming off a loss at the very cusp of the national championship game, and then Allar coming back for his senior season? You don't have to change much. We're so close, is the main sentiment from Andy Kotelnicki and what he said to you. And then Drew Allar said, we're not coming back just to come back, which is something that we've said here on the show. Like, the point is to be great this year for those guys from a personal and from a team perspective. Those feel at least somewhat in opposition of getting to, Allar talked about getting to the next level as an individual. So I guess, can you explain how those either are or are not in conflict of, you don't have to change anything, you're so close, but we've got to get to the next level. We came back for a reason, sort of thing. Yeah.
I see them very much as being in agreement. One is Andy Kotelnicki saying, look, you are not blowing this up. You're not reinventing the wheel, right? The things, the process that, and look, it will be different. This is going to be a different offense than you saw last year, just by nature of Tyler Warren not being in the program. But the idea of, this is how we study film. These are the things that we have established in the offense that we have the opportunity to build upon. These are our core concepts. All of those things, Andy Kotelnicki is saying they're right there. Right. They got them to that point. Now that they have had that experience, you understand that you need to do all of those things again and more. Mm-hmm. Drew Allar's sentiment is, we're doing more, right? Like, these are the things that have to be done. Right. And really the context of that quote specifically for Drew that I thought was, or that I do think is important, is I was asking him about, what it means culturally in the program this season to have so many guys who chose to come back, who had an opportunity to play in the NFL, but are not playing in the NFL this year. Mm-hmm. And what he was basically saying was, the leadership is just different. It creates a different dynamic when you have that many guys with that much credibility to be present. And all of that infiltrates and trickles down through the rest of the roster. And I do think that there's an inverse dynamic of that, okay, you've got a lot of really important players that a lot of the program really cares about. Like, I mean, they talk about family, all the conversations this summer, and even before then, right? James Franklin setting up this family atmosphere and how important it is to them to have that dynamic of caring about one another. Okay, well, now you got Drew Allar, who everybody cares about deeply, coming back and giving it a final run. Yeah. Like, how many players will take that to heart and try to match the work ethic that he's already bringing to the table? Nick Singleton, right? Zane Durant. Like, you've got Zeki Wheatley, who has evolved through the course of his career. But like, all of these guys, when you hear from Chuck Losey in February, it's not a coincidence. Like, yes, we identify them as the best players on the team, absolutely, but also most of these guys are the best workers on the team. Yeah, they're setting a standard. They put in all of the little details, all of the habitual stuff that is learned and is necessary to succeed at this level, at the highest level. So I do think that it has an interesting back and forth, in which case both kind of sides can grow. Yeah.
What did you get the sense from Allar for his personal, I don't know if motivations is the right word, or his personal goals for this upcoming season? Because he's obviously a guy in the center of this conversation as the guy who returned that set a lot of things in motion for this particular season. So when you're having that conversation with him about being better, doing more. I guess the question I keep coming back to in my mind is like, he's always been that guy who works. He's always been that guy who is the studious, knows the answers to the test. And then when the test comes, in those biggest games, it's been a struggle. So I guess what's the motivating factor for that to be different this year? What's the change? I guess because the conversation here is like, there's no change. There's just more of the same. So I think some fans are a little bit trepidatious about that. And what's your sense of Allar and this group that another year is the answer to get over that hump, that they're going to be better football players for it this year?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think there are opportunities to craft whatever people say to fit however you, right? No matter what he says in that circumstance, right? More of the same. You can take it one way or another. But I like, to me, the biggest sentiment that came through for all these guys is, yes, there's going to be a narrative that makes sense and is partially true of getting back to Miami, right? You've got this seminal moment and it didn't go the way that Penn State wanted it to. They missed out on an opportunity to play for a national championship and they want to get back, running it back. That's, check mark for sure. That's not really why all these guys came back. They all came back because they see an opportunity to get better at playing football, right?
Yeah.
Just by sheer participation. He brought it up specifically that this will be his 5th year in his life as the starting quarterback of a football team, right? He hasn't been doing it that long. And there are guys who come out of college football at 21 as a quarterback and go on and have success, right?
Yeah.
But not that often, right? Like how many quarterbacks fail in the NFL? I mean, we do this every year where you see these guys and they're a hot commodity. They get drafted to the worst team in professional football and they nosedive and it just doesn't go their way. Drew Allar has a chance. Nick Singleton has a chance. Katron Allen has a chance. Zane Durant has a chance. Zachy Wheatley has a chance. All of these guys have an opportunity to be better football players at the end of this with literally their skills, but also their grasp of the game and specific to their positions that can benefit them at the next level. And that time, right? It's the tipping point, right?
Yeah.
Malcolm Gladwell in the 10,000 reps, like 10,000 hours. You're going to add a big chunk to that before you head off into your professional career. So I do think that they all are bought in and motivated very much by that element. And it's helping and having an effect, having an influence on not just themselves and holding themselves accountable, but everybody else.
Yeah. And I think that there's a little bit of coach speak in what you just said that's true, but kind of gets washed out by the fact that everyone says it without explaining the context. So football's hard. And if you don't understand or aren't firmly in grasp of certain concepts or certain situations or things that a defense or an offense can do, that causes you conflict. The more times you see it, the more times you have the ability to react correctly in the moment and make the right decision. That's football. Like, how do you react in the moment and how much of that makes you uncomfortable and how comfortable are you? And that can come from a number of different ways, Nate. Like, you can just be inherently cool under pressure no matter what, and you process at an ultra high level, as you mentioned. And some guys, it takes more reps. It takes them seeing it and doing it a couple of times before they fully integrate it into, their DNA as a person. And the part I find interesting about this whole conversation, this is a bit of a tangent, is like we just have this on-off switch of, I think there's a fair aspect of this where if you've watched football for a long time, you probably have the things subconsciously, when a guy is or isn't good at football. And at quarterback, we have this, this kind of all in or all out perception of, is he the guy or is he not the guy? And if he's not the guy immediately, he's never going to be the guy. And very few guys ever go from not the guy to the guy. And I know I said guy a whole lot, but you know what I'm saying. So with Allar, people are out on Allar because he wasn't immediately this thing. But, I think he's trying to prove you can get better at football and become a game-defining quarterback, first-round draft pick, superstar, champion through the process of loving football and getting better at football every single year. That has been kind of the Penn State way in a lot of different ways at that position of incremental progress, even going back to a guy like Sean Clifford. So total tangent there.
No, but do you like Daniel Jeremiah? Is that like a name?
I think he's really good. Yeah.
Okay. So I pulled it up just because I thought it was so definitive, maybe.
Yeah.
Somebody
who isn't us talking about it, like a neutral third party.
Correct. His eyes looking in whatever way, right? It's probably a little bit cursory when you have to look at that many quarterbacks, but quote, right? Like from his specific piece about Allar last week. Quote, Penn State was excellent at running back, tight end, and on the offensive line last season. However, after studying Allar, I was shocked by how underwhelming the receiver core played. They couldn't separate, drifted on routes, and didn't fight for the ball. Allar has received plenty of criticism for some crucial turnovers, but after digging in and watching the tape, I don't think he had much help on the outside. For a top-tier program, there simply weren't a lot of big window throws. Allar needs to continue to improve his footwork and decision-making, but he also needs some playmakers on the outside. I know the Nittany Lions were active in the transfer portal this offseason. Hopefully, there will be more support for him at the position in 2025. So, two things. One, all of this happens not in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Right. James Franklin calls it the ultimate team sport, but very specifically, your performance is in ways dictated by the performance of others. That does not mean that he didn't miss the throw to Nick Singleton in the Orange Bowl. It doesn't mean that he didn't make a bad decision going across the field to Amari Evans to end the game effectively.
But to Daniel Jeremiah's point, Amari Evans was not in position that he was supposed to be in on that route.
Correct.
And Andrew Berger, who's putting that on Allar, like there is the shared responsibility that we don't ever get to in football because routes happen off screen. Like literally because we're watching the ball, you don't see routes happen elsewhere. And a lot of people don't have the, if you don't see it, you can't learn about it. You can't have the context for it. You don't like, there's just this progression, this stunting of our understanding of football because it is so complex and you can only watch certain things at one time. I think it's important that you have Daniel Jeremiah here and other scouts talking about Drew Allar. And as Jeremiah points out, the ecosystem he's in. I would say the thing that provides credibility is he's watching other quarterbacks and their systems and their situations. And so he can compare, okay, Allar doesn't have a lot of layups. He does not have a lot of big open windows where like, oh, the first read's wide open. Oh, there we go. That's an easy touchdown. Now, again, you pointed to the fact that, he misses a throw to a first read that was wide open in that Orange Bowl. And so there are moments where he misses those, but there aren't as many moments for him as other quarterbacks may have, which is something I'm not watching every football team. I watch opponents that Penn State is going to play and then the opponents they play, but I'm not out there studying offense after offense. So I think that context provides the credibility to the conversation of the passing attack, which is the next part I wanted to get into. Andy Kotelnicki talking about the receiver room, tight end room, how things played out last year and how things could play out this year. I guess, what was your sense of the direction for the offense and the passing game this year?
He said, and it's again, like there's just things that set off alarms a little bit, that he believes strongly, based on what he's seen on film and in the limited windows that they've had in practice, that they have guys on the outside, receivers, who can do things with the ball. Translation: once they catch it, the play isn't over necessarily.
I find that interesting. That's specific.
Me too.
That's
me too.
That's not about catching the ball down the field. That's not
right.
That's not about like we have guys that get open. It's when they get the ball, things happen. Like, okay. All right.
But he he framed that as a positive in ways that I think it's fair to say last year didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Quite like that. And so that's look, it's always a give and take, because for as much as Daniel Jeremiah is going to point out that the receivers didn't really help Drew all that much last season, which is totally warranted and fair, Tyler Warren did, right? Tyler Warren did help him and bailed him out a few times. Like, and that's the deal, is no quarterback is perfect. Every quarterback needs to help their targets, their intended targets, and the inverse, right? The intended targets have to bail him out sometimes, where not every single play is
you don't want to live
teeth.
life on hard mode as a quarterback all the time. Like, you just can't do that and then succeed unless you are like, even great quarterbacks have individual seasons where they do that, but over the course of their career, they don't carry a team on their back alone for like 10 years. Like, that's insane. Yeah.
But that's what's so fascinating and at stake this season is, somebody brought it up in the chat, like, is Singleton has really made a ton of strides as a pass catching running back. We've seen that in that trajectory through his career. Is this the season where he makes that catch, where the most difficult catch is one that he is able to come down with? Right? Is there going to be help in other places from Pena, right? From Kyron Hudson, from Devontae Ross? Like, are these guys, and not just them, because I do think that there's been an overshadowing of the reality that Tysier Denmark is still a guy who should contribute to Penn State's football team this season, right? Kobe Howard, there are Lyric Samuel, there are players on this team who there's some optimism for them and what their potential might be. I'm not saying that any of those guys are necessarily going to be in the top 2 on the receptions list at the end of the season, but actually making a contribution beyond the top 2, which was something that did not happen last year outside of Liam Clifford and his 17-ish catches. Like, it's going to be so interesting to see what the distribution looks like, because I don't think that they have a dude. Like, they still don't have that obvious, you have to go out of your way to get them the ball, to pass them the ball the way that they do with the running backs and feeding them the football, right? Yeah.
So this is another interesting thing, talking about Jim Knowles. We're going to shift over here before we move on to our next topic and talk about Jim Knowles in Happy Valley. You said you get the sense that he's going to be in Happy Valley for a long time, whatever that means, like
a while.
Right. I had the same thought about Tom Allen, and I was very wrong about Tom Allen on a number of different fronts. And I'll just say up front, like, that was to me, that was a surprise. But I also got the same feeling about Jim Knowles. I'm just hesitant to make this. I'm hesitant to have the same thought based on similar situations and circumstances. An older guy in this situation who seemingly doesn't have head coaching aspirations and is very good at what he does. So I guess, I don't know. I'm trying not to take the answer from you, but like, what's the difference here between those two? And do you think that like the fit is better here from Jim Knowles and Penn State as an organization?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, now, look, I think that Tom was a best available situation for Penn State, where it was appealing to get somebody that had recent Big Ten head coaching experience. By all accounts, a good human being, a decent man, right? To bring that into the program. I don't know if philosophically he would have been necessarily the first choice. Jim Knowles won a national championship last season with Ohio State, could have gone back to Ohio State, also could have gone to Oklahoma, also could have gone to Notre Dame. He chose Penn State, right? That's it. He picked Penn State, and for a person who has the opportunity to go anywhere they want, that's significant, right? What does that mean? For him, he wanted to get back to his home state. He wanted to inch, I'm quoting him, like inch his way closer to Philadelphia and get make right as his career. Like, I think he sees this as his career arc, like not saying the accomplishments, but it's coming to a close. He's not going to do this forever.
Right.
And he's 60 years old. He's building a house in State College. He believes he's capable of helping Penn State football get over the top, and they need it, right? Like, this isn't a heavy lift. He brought that up. Like, this is not they're not doing well, and you got to come in and spread it out over two or 3 years. He does not have head coaching aspirations. I'm reading the comments in the chat. Like, and it's funny, to be honest with you, but I'll write it eventually. Look out for it, but because it will be a paid story at Blue White Illustrated. But hearing his take on Andy Koldenicki going through the hiring process, right? Andy Koldenicki wants to be a head coach. There's no mystery about this. He's not a lifer at Penn State as an offensive coordinator. Jim Knowles is watching that and has thoughts, and it's interesting to see like the two of them process that, because there's so much more in college football beyond X's and O's and your direction of an offense or a defense, right? It's bureaucracy. It's no, I know.
No, you're absolutely right. That's absolutely right. I just think that that's the only thing I care about is what's going on in the field. But it's all, that's why we work so well together, Nate. That's why all of this show is so good.
Things that you want to see happen on the field or not happen on the field cannot happen with all of the tremendous, I'm censoring myself, my mom might be listening, BS that happens behind the scenes. Like, all of that stuff only happens after you go through it.
So I got into football, and I was mostly interested in football as a kid and like throughout college because politics was awful. And then you realize politics is in everything, not like big P politics, but when humans get together, politics happen. Christopher Riley says, speaking of politicking, not seeing a lot of national praise for Zakee Wheatley, and I'm shocked. Is he being slept on? I don't think he's being slept on. I think Zakee Wheatley's a very good football player. He has not established a pedigree of a player that is a national name in college football. Now, he could do that this year. I believe he's going to be in a starring role in this defense. So maybe that is part of what we've talked about here. But Zakee Wheatley coming back for his senior season, he was not a widely recruited guy with a name during recruiting, and he has not been consistently a starter at Penn State. So, like, I'm just giving you the facts of what's happened throughout his career. That doesn't mean that guys can't change at the end and write their own ending. But this is Zakee Wheatley, Christopher, is not a guy that I think the national media would pay attention to for some of those reasons that we just outlined.
He had a really strong playoff and, was a little more hit or miss, I think, during the season. Like, I think he had a good season last year, and he could have gone to the NFL. But I think it behooves him, and I think it serves him well to be back at Penn State for an extra year and try to translate. And I mean, he said this, like, try to translate that spurt at the end into a season long, and especially now that he is, kind of stepping into a role where he can be the guy. Yeah, it's going to be different.
So that's the thing about Zakee Wheatley so far too in his career. He has played a supporting role within the defense. KJ Winston and Jalen Reed were the guys that were like in the playmaking roles in the defense over the last several seasons. Now it's it's Zakee Wheatley's turn to be in that playmaking role. So if you're playing a supporting role, you don't have the opportunity. They changed the defense in that game against Notre Dame to put him into the boundary so he would get so many tackles. Like that, the X's and O's, coming back to the X's and O's, Nate, these are the things that set guys up for these storylines. Like, it wasn't just that Zakee Wheatley had a great, like, he turned something on. They changed how they were using him, and he responded by making plays. So, like, these are the things that are, like, the conversations and the broader narrative and context that if you don't know that part, it feels like a story of, like, the story, like, just blossomed in the playoffs, and, like, it's never that clean.
Yeah, the circumstances change.
Yeah. Which also makes me a bummer. I think that's also like, it's easy to say like, oh, the light turned on and everyone loves that narrative. And it's like, well, there's some more stuff to it. And I think that he did play well. Like there was a progression in his abilities during the playoff. I'm not trying to say that he didn't do a good job.
Yeah. You still have to make the play when the opportunity, right? There's no guarantees in those circumstances, right? And like for you, the conversation around Nittany is probably somewhat similar, right?
Yeah.
When the contact rate, but I'm not going to say that the light turned on. I think he's always been a very good player with the potential to be really, really good. But it's hard to argue that with Abdul limited down the stretch in the playoff, that Nittany didn't show something else.
Yeah.
To me, like he showed some. I remain very impressed by the interception that he had in the second half of the Orange Bowl.
Yeah,
and I do think that with more opportunities this season, he will make more of those types of plays.
Yeah,
for Penn State.
Penn State has a lot of hybrid edge rushers that have linebacker qualities or that tweener. Nittany is not one of them. So for him to make that particular play was super impressive. Okay, last part of the show. Got to turn the lights back on. We are now out of inside the conversation studio. We're going to be talking about our season preview. Our first in a long line, undetermined how long that'll be, of season preview conversations heading into training camp at the end of July. So these are just going to be some general, like pretty high level conversation topics because Nate and I, to give you full transparency, are also starting this process of our examination of last night I turned on some Oregon film to just refresh on like, okay, what is their offense? What is their defense? What do they like to do? What is the style and personality of this team to then preview for the upcoming year? So we're just getting into this. So these are going to be some pretty big high level topics. So what are you most curious about? So as you're starting your studying process, what are you most curious about for this fall that you want to dig into maybe to start?
I haven't heard a lot about Penn State's receivers.
No? Oh, we should do, we should do a whole show on that.
Yeah. Look, your process is decidedly different from mine. I feel like I feel like I've got a fairly broad or good grasp on what these guys look like, are supposed to look like at the top of the depth chart. I think that there's some more to play out with depth, right? But to me, one of the major storylines this season is Uriah Fisher.
Yeah,
there's no studying that I can do for Uriah Fisher, right?
Yeah,
he either does what people say he's capable of doing, or he doesn't. And if he doesn't, with Max Granville out for a prolonged period of time, what does that look like? How does Penn State respond to that? Jalen Harvey, right? How much have you seen of him, right? 43 snaps or whatever it was last year. There's just not, there are some circumstances on this team where what the question is that's being asked, and they're either going to answer it or they're not. And if they're not going to answer it, then what does plan B look like?
Yeah.
And yesterday I wrote something this morning for the site about PFF, right? PFF they did top 10 lists of every position group. There were 11 position groups. Mm-hmm. Penn State had a top 10 player, at least one top 10 player in 6 of them. So
it's a good team.
That's good.
That's pretty good.
That's good. I don't know what it said. I don't know what it said. It doesn't address. It's not asking about the depth of this team, which I do think is good and talented. But it is suggesting pretty strongly that, I mean, this is stupid as I'm saying, but literally Penn State has one of the 10 best players in college football at 6 positions. Yeah. And most refreshing and or eye-opening for me is this reminder of, hey, at running back, they got 2.
Right.
Nick was ranked number 3 on their list, and Katron was ranked number 6. So you got like, there shouldn't be really, for all of the conversation that we have and we'll continue to have about Drew and about the receivers and some of the uncertainties about the receivers and can Drew take the next step? All of those things are absolutely critical, but Penn State's going to run the football so much this year.
And we both think that they're going to be better at running back. So they've been physically talented. You know, Nick Singleton's been physically talented, and I think there's room for him to develop into a genuine superstar. This is almost coming directly out of the text conversation that Nate and I had yesterday of Nick Singleton, the athlete, and the perception of him has been that he's a superstar. His production has been above average to great, but there is a level above. You know, we talk about this with Allar. There's a level above in terms of generating things at a higher level on his own that I think Stan Drayton emphasizes and Nick Singleton can improve on and has been working to improve throughout his whole career. That's a huge step that this team can take for next year as well. And I think for me, that would be the curious thing to study where that happens, you know, in the timeline of, you know, plays and things like that and breaking that down from that play to play perspective. What's the biggest wild card on the schedule for you next year as far as an opponent perspective?
Look, there's conversations to be had about the strengths of Penn State's opponents, right? Because certainly people are going to make the argument for right after Oregon and after Ohio State. Then what is it? It's 10 games that Penn State's going to be favored in, right? Might be 11 games depending on what the Oregon line is. Like, I don't know what that line is going to look like.
Right.
But that's, to me, that's kind of irrelevant and misses the point that I thought should have taught lessons last season. It never seems to, but winning is hard and doing it on the road is harder. And so, like, I don't think it was a coincidence that if you're looking back at two of the most dramatic games that Penn State played last season, inarguably were Southern Cal and Minnesota.
Yeah.
Right. Like
on the road,
both times. Yep. So yeah, UCLA with, again, debatable, but pretty good quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't think you can take away from the fact that Nico Iamaleava is a good quarterback, a good college quarterback. Even if you want to say the Tennessee system does not translate to anything, he still operated a system in college football at a high level and threw for a lot of yards. I don't want to take too much away from that. Yeah, so after Oregon, that's a big one. Week. Yeah.
On the West Coast. So that could be intriguing. Indiana and Nebraska late in the season at home.
Yeah, what are those teams like this year? I think Indiana is a great question of, like, can they sustain what they did last year? So this leads into a great question then. Toughest stretch. We talked about the Big Ten meat grinder, how they'd hit October and then they'd have bam, 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 like 3 or 4 games in a row that would define the season. This year and the last couple of years, it's been a little more spread out. Like, there's been a little bit more of, okay, maybe they only have 2 games that matter this year, as you pointed out. But here are the stretches that I put out there for you. Whiteout versus Oregon, followed by the trip to UCLA you just mentioned, or this one I feel like is coming in second, but I'm just going to pitch it to you anyway. At Iowa, Zach in the chat says that. Z-Man, I think, in the chat was talking about Iowa. There is a bye, but then Ohio State and then Indiana right after that game against Ohio State. So that 4-week stretch where you've got at Iowa, bye, Ohio State, Indiana. Which one of those two do you think is the hardest stretch for Penn State to overcome? Just based on now, like, not knowing some of these things, but just the perception that you have sitting here in July.
I mean, if we're going to include, that's a month, right? The Iowa by Ohio State, Indiana is a month of.
I threw in the Indiana thing just because it felt weird that there was a bye. Like, obviously, that one's not as hard as going to the West Coast after an emotional game and the whiteout. So I was trying to, like, make it as even as possible.
I think the schedule is going to be harder than Penn State fans are currently anticipating it to be. I think there are losable games on the schedule, which is, yes, like every year that's the case. But the disparity last year was like the best right? Penn State played the final rankings number 1, 2, and 3 teams in the country last season. But they also played a lot of like way down there. There's more meat in the middle this season than Penn State had last year. And over 12 games, that gets more difficult to sustain that and to bring it every week.
As you hit attrition, football is a game of 100% injury. Everyone gets hurt. So what is it? That's also, I think, an aspect of kind of these season defining things is luck, that you get to Ohio State and Drew Allar isn't injured the week before, and he is full go this year against Ohio State.
Yeah.
So
I said it yesterday, and I'm actually curious because it got some pushback, and I'll be interested to see what the chat says, and I'll be interested to see what you say. I think that I'm already saying it, and I'm not one of these guys. I think if Penn State beats Ohio State at Ohio State this season, it will be inarguably the best win, the most quality win of James Franklin's career.
I would go further than that, and I would say, how far back until you find a more quality win than that? Like how far? Because I think it's easily, yes, there are some narratives
for Penn State
around
football.
2016. Yeah, for Penn State football specifically, because it would be putting them in the driver's seat for a national championship run, like unequivocally. And I understand like the college football playoff changes a lot of these things, but there are the narrative defining things in 2015, 16, 17, all that for Penn State with James Franklin. But yeah, that win in that situation, I think it's not just James Franklin. Go back to the last big game that would set Penn State up without knowing what happens after, right? Like in the moment, if they beat Ohio State, you're going to feel like you're on top of the world. Like, okay, this team is winning the national championship. They're the front runner now. I don't know the last time Penn State was in that situation. And so I think that's not a hot take. I think that's I'll one up you on the hotness.
Yeah. It's to me, it goes back to the, some of the conversation around 2016, which I think is a little disingenuous, right? That it was a fluke for Penn State to win against Ohio State in that game. And that started Penn State's resurgence. Mm-hmm. But to me, the fact that this is at Ohio State and a game that the entire college football ecosystem has scheduled as like potentially the game of the year, in any conference at any time of year, right? Like I just think there's so much that goes into this that would change things in terms of quality of resume, right, for Penn State. But again, that I bring back over and over and over, they just got to go 10-2. That's it.
Just get into the tournament.
Just go 10-2 and then get in. And like but you got to do that. It doesn't matter if you lose to Ohio State and Oregon. And maybe you can win one and lose the other, win both, whatever. But you can't lose more than 2 games. But if you keep it 10 wins plus, you're in. So
Stephen Light says, thanks for the unrelenting year-round coverage. Stephen, appreciate you for saying that. And I am going to relent. You were mentioning Big Ten Media Days. I'm not going to be here on the 24th. So I don't know if we're going to have a show that day, but I definitely won't be here. So it's uncomfortable sometimes to receive compliments. So thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. But I'll also undercut it by saying, not going to be here on the 24th. So I will be relenting just a little bit later this month. But that does it for today. In a total non sequitur, Nate Bauer, appreciate you being here, buddy. We'll be back tomorrow with more conversation, more preview, maybe doing a little more talking about that Ohio State-Oregon conversation and what you see on the horizon for the Nittany Lions, breaking down games, season preview. I wasn't kidding. Like, we're using July to talk about all the things coming up in 2025 because it's the perfect time to do it before training camp gets here, so you know the things you need to know before we get really rolling for Penn State football this fall. So until then, I'm Thomas Frank Carr for Nate Bauer. We'll talk to you later.